Welcome to the Frontline Man podcast. My name is Mark Queppet. I'm a Catholic family man. I've been a professional men's coach since 2013, where I've focused on helping guys eliminate escapism like pornography, scrolling, gaming, etc., and optimize their performance in life. And today, I am very happy to have with me on the kind of relaunch of this Frontline Man podcast, my good friend Giff. How you doing, man?
How's it going, Mark? Good to be back.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had a few conversations before, but I've always really enjoyed them a lot, and I think you've got some really interesting things to say to guys in the modern world today. So why don't you introduce yourself, like what you're all about and what you do, professionally now.
Yeah, Mark. Online here, I write a lot on the X platform about guys struggling with dead bedrooms, sort of attraction between men and women, and trying to bring a lot of that, like, kind of masculine self-leadership into more of the Christian world. So I've been focused on that for a while now. Quit porn with your leadership back 8 years ago, and kind of got my marriage back on track, got sexuality on track, and started talking about it. And man, there's just like, I don't know, there's the harvest is plentiful, the laborers are few when it comes to giving guys advice that really works in these situations. So I didn't set out to build a business, but I did.
Yeah, yeah, and I've seen you kind of really blow up on X, and you're getting a lot of engagement on everything. You're writing some great articles and posts, and so I'd highly recommend anyone who's following me to go check out Giff. He's got some really good stuff. And speaking of, I know you recently launched this book here
Yes, it did,
with
Mark. Yes, it did.
with a foreword by yours truly.
Excellent
And so,
forward.
how's that been going?
Yeah, no, sold. Been selling copies of it. A lot of people talking about it. Um, I'm surprised at the breadth of people who are reading this book. I'm seeing, it's a book written for young, unmarried Christian men, basically just telling them the ropes, telling them about male-female dynamics, how to date, how attraction works. Uh,
Kind of like red pill for like Christian teens, male
Basically,
teens
I'm
in a sense.
bringing the red pill to the church youth group, man. That's what's going
Right.
on. Um, but yeah, but I'm surprised at the older men, guys who are already married, guys in their 50s, 60s,
Hmm.
saying, "Yeah, I picked this book up because I thought maybe good for my son." So I just thumbed through it, like, holy crap, I need my wife is just putting up with so much here. And then a number of reviews from women who are like, I learned something about myself reading this
Mm,
book, which
yeah.
that's gratifying. That's not something I expected, but I really think this is just so desperately needed right now because in Christian circles, in culture in general, but especially Christian circles, we're taught that marriage is important, that love is important, but we're not kind of taught how it works.
Yeah, I think Christianity does a good job of explaining kind of like the agape style love, like, that sort of universal goodwill for other people and what that looks like. But I think it's really kind of stumbled when it comes to explaining what it looks like once sexuality is involved, because there's
Eros.
yeah, eros, there's some of the dynamics there get a little counterintuitive, at least coming from the mainstream perspective. And this actually is a good segue into one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is, what do you think some of like the biggest misinterpretations of Christian teaching are that contribute to dead bedrooms?
Mm. Well, if I had to sum it down to like one thing, it's the idea that this is something that good sex or getting sex in general is something you are entitled to as a
Mm,
husband in your marriage. And then maybe, you know, kind of going one level deeper on that, it's is the idea that the guy gets something out of his sex, that he needs sex, and that, this is her duty to sort of just give it to you. And that whole frame is the key to a very unsatisfying bedroom, and ultimately getting closer and closer to a dead bedroom because it's not satisfying for her, but it's also, when it comes down to it, not satisfying for him. And I think ultimately this goes as far as what scriptures they try to pull from. First Corinthians 7 is a big thing, and I think it's a deep misunderstanding of what St. Paul was trying to talk about in that passage, where it's like he's trying to say that husbands and wives should actually live together and have sex, right? Like there was this idea. The early Corinthians, they were going off the rails in the New Testament era. Um, that on the one hand, they were saying that since sex isn't spiritual, it's not important, and so you can do whatever you want. But then on the other hand, they were saying because sex isn't spiritual, uh, if you wanted to be a really good married couple, you should like live apart and just like be monastics or whatever,
Hmm.
quasi like monastic like things. And so you had all
Okay.
this going on, and Paul's like, no, 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 you really, you should live together. And so there's this verse in there that's like a man should give his sexuality to his wife and the wife to her husband freely. And people are like, yeah, should. So therefore, there's no not being in the mood or whatever. You need to do your duty. And they miss all the like all the organic, just what it takes to build attraction in
Mm.
a sexual diet. Like all there's a whole mess of stuff that you need to learn to do that well. And the idea that you can kind of sidestep that because you got some rules, it's pretty darn legalistic.
Yeah. So this legalism you see as a big kind of obstacle.
Yeah.
And um I don't know if like you see this at all, but I also then on some sense see this like a flip side too that starts to occur where guys almost get so beaten down in the process of having a dead bedroom that they stop even like expecting it, where it's like there's that they it's like the entitlement almost it's like gone off the table so far that it's almost they're completely disconnected from it anymore, and that's where they start reaching usually toward porn or some other kind of
Like
coping
boomer
mechanism.
humor sort of stuff. Like, oh yeah, it's the ball and chain. The like that's to
Right.
be expected. Of course, passion wanes over time, and you can't expect it.
Right. And I'm curious, do you think that there's anything that the church does that facilitates that, or Christianity in general that kind of contributes to this basically a sense of complacency around marital sexuality? As just like, yeah, it's men and women are different. Things are just going to suck at some point. You'll have some passion in the beginning if you're lucky, and then it's going to fizzle out, especially once kids come into the picture. There almost seems to be this that's the way it goes. And as a man, you got to suck it up and just never want sex again. And most guys, they kind of seem like they're just dying a slow death in that sort of sexual desert.
Oh man, it sucks. Um, the way I would put that, I guess the way I would frame that is it's part of a bigger issue with Christianity and masculinity in general now in the church, where the idea that a man has a drive, that he has desires, and that he wants to like push, like point his virility in a direction and run with it. Um, that is not deeply embraced. If anything, these are considered like sinful tendencies, and the ideal is a very passive, receptive ethos. And there's some historical reasons why that's like considered, the de facto Christian ethos. Um, I think it was David Murrow in his book "Why Men Hate Going to Church" had this fascinating like social experiment they did. They got this old book. Well, in a church setting, they did this survey where they listed all these traits, and they said which of these set of traits are more, descriptive of like the ethos of Jesus and his disciples. And they had these
Okay.
two columns of them, and it was like 95% the one column over the other, and they were
Mm-hmm.
things like assertive, driven, those kind of things, results oriented versus like accepting and those, anyways, that kind of thing. Well, as it turns out, these lists of traits were just directly lifted from the old book Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And these groups, the control group, you know, or the groups taking the survey didn't know it, but they were just basically saying, yeah, Christianity's about being like a woman. Like that's what that's what Christianity's all about. And if you actually, I mean, if you go back and you read the Gospels, you read the Old and New Testaments, you read the sort of ethos of the saints in the Bible. They are driven, passionate, fiery people who go after the things that they're all about. And when the Spirit comes down, it doesn't like take that away or say that's bad. It says, I like the fire. I want to correct the aim, where I want you to aim the fire. And so I think basically you take that ethos into the bedroom, right? And you say, just be passive, just wait, be patient, you know, kind of go with the flow. And you tell that to a man, and yeah, that's a recipe for a dead bedroom, if ever there was one.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because what I've seen kind of when I've worked with guys around, you know, their marriages, their dead bedrooms and things like that, they, especially if they've got some either familiarity with red pill stuff or they just got a lot of repressed resentment, they kind of only see two like polarized paths to fixing their relationship. It's either I'm going to be the passive good boy who's just tries, my whole goal is to just make her happy. Just roll over, be as peaceful, as accepting, as understanding, as kind and gentle and all that kind of stuff. It's like, I'm going to be that, or I'm going to be like this, like red pill mad dog, you know, dominant monster kind of dude.
You can be the simp or the asshole. Those are your only options.
That's basically what I see.
One of those two was
guys kind of struggling. Right. Exactly. And the reason why I think guys struggle is because it gets a little complicated to find that middle path where you're strong and loving, you know, where you're, you know, have compassion for your partner and care for their feelings, but then you also have a respect for yourself in the process and what you will not tolerate, what you want, all that kind of stuff. And they don't know how to mesh them together. And so I'm curious, like, have you noticed anything that helps guys find that more nuanced, balanced, holistic masculinity?
Well, I mean, what helps them is the pain, right? When they get to a point where it's like, this is not working for me and I need something different. I mean, honestly, you know, part of the reason I'm in the business and am having a lot of success here is because there are too many people pushing one of these two options and they both suck. Women hate them. Yeah. Like, men hate being them and women hate receiving it on either side. And I think the key here is that it's not a balance between the two. It's the real thing that both of those two things are kind of a caricature of. And so you don't have to feel like you're in this weird middle ground. No, you're the real thing, and it's a powerful and exciting thing. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like what are some things where it just like hits you over the head with a ton of bricks. I've done surveys, right? I've done surveys where women answer questions, and they will come at the end of the day and say, you know, the guy, there was one about whether or not the woman orgasms, but the guy was just going all out and confident and wasn't like really, really worried about giving her the perfect experience. And it was like 2 or 3 to 1. The woman was like, no, I want the guy who's like the stag, who's really confident and makes me feel relaxed and isn't like super, super worried, you know, like a butler, that he's giving me the perfect experience. I'd actually prefer that. And it was 3 to 1. So you take that and tell the guys, and things start to click because they know there's a problem.
Yeah. And I think it shows up too in like, even like especially around conflict as well. Like I was just coaching this guy, and he's got, you know, a very contentious relationship with his wife at the moment, and they've got this pattern where he'll do something that she perceives as careless or, you know, stupid, whatever. Like, you know, if he's cooking food and he makes a little mess, she'll come in and she'll be like, hey, you know, you made a mess. Okay. And he just won't respond in a way that she likes. And then she'll blow up into this big, like, character assassination,
Hmm.
where it's like, you don't care about this, you don't care about anything, you don't care about me, you're a mess. And he hates this. He kind of feels like he's this puppy dog getting his nose shoved in shit, being told bad dog,
How's he
right?
responding in
Well,
the
that's the
moment?
thing. It's a lot of times he'll either he just has, I have to roll over and just submit and be, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so
Mhm.
sorry. But then that builds up resentment, and then he blows up. Like throw shits all over the floor, you yell at her, like that kind of thing.
And then it's all
And
about that. It's all, how could you do that? How could you talk to me that way? Right.
right. And so what he's like, what the challenge is for him is like being able to admit when he is wrong on something, particularly in the finite, but learning how to draw the line in terms of, hey, I'm not a fucking puppy dog. Okay. Like there's a certain level of respect that we both need to honor here. And as soon as like the conversation moves into that point, I'm out. Right. So it's like there's this kind of hard line assertiveness, but then there also has to be a legitimate taking ownership of where you do screw things up. I mean,
Mhm.
like, I don't think women genuinely respect that. There's this idea for the macho guy who never admits he's wrong, and, he never makes a mistake,
Yeah, they
etc.
love that.
Uh,
They love that.
yeah. Yeah.
Well,
It's like,
there was a guy he was talking about a situation like that. He was one of the guys in my coaching community who's talking to some of the new recruits, who was describing just that situation, Mark. And it was like she came in, is like, don't put the baby down. That toy was on the other side of the room, and he could have, this toy for babies, the baby could choke on. And he's like, I either okay, or I like start arguing with her, but this is kind of her turf, and it's like, I don't have a good option here. And the one guy is like, no, what you do is you like throw yourself over the toy like it's a grenade and be like, oh my gosh, hon, you're right. Like, you have fun with it. He talked about a time where his wife was like, no, don't park here, this is a bad parking space, park that. And he's like, oh, you're totally right. And he like starts parking in every parking space in the thing. Oh wait, there's an old band-aid on this one, it's not no good. And it's just like, can you have fun, or are you acting like you're just like, this is a threat? And that's
mm,
that's really the question of frame in this situation. You may not like her second guessing you, but are you acting like this is a threat to you?
right. And so that's an interesting point, though, is like, is there a line with that where the interaction has gotten bad enough to where the being humorous seems like you're kind of disconnected from reality, and
Mhm.
maybe even disconnected from like just like appropriate norms and morals and that kind of thing.
Well, you have to work from where you are, right? But you want to take one step closer in that direction. And I think for a lot of guys, I mean, you're talking about, what do you do with men who see these their only two options? It can be hugely helpful to even know that there's a third option out there, and to
Yeah.
flesh that third option out. Wow, in a marriage where sparks are flying, she'll poke at him and he'll like grin, oh, it's on, baby. And like coming up with little humorous things to reply to show you're not threatened, to kind of take it and roll with the punches. That's a lot of fun, and that such things exist, even if it's not, oh, okay, we can have that tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I agree with you completely on that. But here's where, guys will start pushing back against that perspective, at least that I've found, is like, all right, well, you know, we haven't had sex in a long ass time. And I don't know when we're going to. Am I just supposed to keep laughing about the fact that I'm not having sex indefinitely? Like, at what point am I allowed to be mad about this? Like,
Hmm.
and force the issue?
Yeah, well, I don't know that being mad about it necessarily gets you more sex. Um,
Agreed.
it's one of these things where you want to. I mean, here's the thing. Yes, being mad about it is important. Other than besides like saying, "Oh, this is not a problem. It's not a problem," ignoring the problem because of your relationship with yourself. If there's a part of you that says, I'm made for this, and in fact, my marriage is made for this, and we don't have it, and that hurts, that's unrequited longing, you don't want to just stuff that down. But the problem is when you then, your conclusion is, well, since I don't have this, then it's her problem to fix. And whenever
Mm.
a man is going to a woman like, there's this problem and I'm really mad, fix it.
Mm-hmm.
You're putting the ball in her court. And particularly in this issue, you actually don't want it in her court.
Why not?
Because good a good sexual dynamic is one where the man initiates decisively and then her response wells up organically from it. That's like built
Right.
into sexuality itself.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with you on that too. So it's like basically like, all right, you got this anger, but you bring it to her, you're only digging your hole deeper, pretty much. Right. And so the question is, where does the anger go?
Mm. Well, it's interesting how many places it can go and how many places it can go productively. And you talk about that in your content. You say making love to life. That's what this is about. And well, what does anger have to do with making love? Well, you talk in a lot of your stuff about just there's the lover energy, but there's also the conquest energy. Because male
Mm-hmm.
sexuality isn't just a, oh, I want to be huggy and be close to something. It's got a fire to it. It's got real drive. And so when you're wanting to go out and do things, I guess let me give just a little example. There's a friend of mine, again, the same guy in my coaching community, who had a situation where he had a dead bedroom. His wife was going through chemo. It was bad, and he had just assumed, like you talk about, well, she just doesn't have it in her right now. It's just not on the table. It's a health issue, which makes total sense. And then one time he was cleaning something out of the garage and he found this old iPad, and he pulls it up and it's getting her texts. And earlier that day, he had wished her, it was Valentine's Day, and he had wished her a happy
Mm-hmm.
Valentine's Day, and she'd been like, "Oh, that's so corny, right? Come on, cheesy." And then he pulls up this iPad and sees a text today from her pharmacist who mixes up her chemo drugs. It's like, "Hey, happy Valentine's Day," and she's like, "Oh, thank you. That is so sweet." And he held that
Mm.
at that moment, and
Oof.
his whole world went down, and it was the
Yeah.
unconditional love died in it at that point. There's no, I can't presume that my wife is going to be true to me. She has it in her. She has the capacity for sexual attraction. It's just not directed at me. And so what he found, and that was back in like 2010 or something, and he found like the old red pill stuff, the Rollo Tomasi stuff, and
Yeah.
he just threw himself into it. He was just, what do I do? And over the weeks and months, he did all the stuff where it's like, I'm gonna commit to me again. I'm gonna get in the gym. I'm gonna go after things that I'm passionate about. And all of that, what they call dread game, just really, but really just channeling your frustration and building yourself up. And he never told his wife, but he had this little window where he could watch kind of what was going on in her in response. And over the weeks and months, she went from, "Oh, you're just the sweetest thing," to, "Hey, I'm a married woman. This is not appropriate. I love my husband." And he got to watch that change.
Huh. That's
It
wild.
was a crazy
That's
story.
that's a very unique kind of little uh, experiment, where you get to just see your wife's feelings transform in real time in response to what you're doing. And I think in most cases that's what's going to work, right? Like the man is going to take himself seriously. He's going to live. He's going to be the man that he really wants to be, right? And I don't think like I would add maybe a nuance to that, because sometimes guys take that and they go very selfish with it, and
Right.
maybe not even selfish, just primal, like in the sense that if women didn't exist in the world, would you have any decorations on your wall ever? Right? Like, would you even have a bed, or would you just have a mattress on the floor and like a TV with like your game console? Like, guys without women, I think in general, they have certain, they just things they stop caring about, right? If there's no kids around, there's no wife around. And so when I think about, being the man that you want to be, like if we're going to transmute that, like the highest form of masculinity is, I think, the masculine that is connected to, I guess, like the way, the muse, right? His ideal feminine,
Yeah.
being the man that his ideal woman would be attracted to. I think that's actually the most fulfilled man. He's got a conception of, all right, this is what I think the best woman would be. Who would I have to be in order for her to find me attractive? And that's where you're going to get the man who, creates masterpieces of art. That's the guy who builds civilization, right? It's not the guy who's just living for his own little bacheloristic sort of pleasures. And so the man who's connected to that sort of creative energy, yeah, generally speaking, he goes after that full force, then his wife's probably going to be way more attracted to him. And a lot of content is out there around that. Now, I've also worked with a few guys where it seems like they're really doing that, but the problem is actually just purely his wife's problem. Like, she's got issues, maybe mental health issues, maybe physical issues, maybe, trauma. That's another big thing. Like, if there's, abuse in the past, some things that's messed stuff up like that. What do you say to that guy? Because often they get so bitter and resentful over being told it's all on them to fix it when they feel like legitimately, I can't do it.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I ultimately say is that you want to put your best foot forward. Like, you want to know that you're giving your all and you're channeling your sexual drive in a way that fulfills you. And the thing is, the only thing that ultimately works with a woman is when you're doing it for you. Because if there's even a subtle thread of, well, I'm doing this ultimately for her affirmation, and we're getting into a little bit of that paradox before, you're talking about the muse. It's not you're doing it for her affirmation. It's more of you're informed by the great book of nature that is female sexuality, right? You're the law of reality that, God created into the world. This is man, this is woman, this is how they're formed. And if you're acting out of line with it, you're going to have pain, right? That's what we mean by like the muse, but what we mean by like female attraction and how that informs masculinity. But as far as just, I need results from a particular woman, that kind of thing, she'll pick up on that, because any dynamic where it's like, she needs to respond well to you for you to be okay. That shifts the sexual polarity, because then she's holding you up. And so if there's even a hint of that, but then in the situation, well, but she's not responding for some other reasons. There are health reasons. There's, mental health issues, all sorts of things. And in that case, that's kind of telling with this, because what we're talking about, building, living a life you want to live, being fully passionate, putting yourself out there, being an attractive man in a large scale way. This is fulfilling. This is rich. This is the best life you could have. And you're not guaranteed results. You're not guaranteed the perfect marriage. You're not guaranteed to be the richest guy or whatever, but you are guaranteed that you're doing the best you can. And you're playing your hand as well as you can.
Right. And I think you made a really good distinction there that I want to highlight. Like, when I talk about, living as if the ideal feminine was watching, right, and trying to impress your muse in a sense. Guys, they sometimes they'll hear that and like, what, you just simp for your imaginary perfect woman? It's like, no, it's more just that you cannot actually conceive of your highest masculine in the vacuum of femininity, right? Like, masculinity without femininity, it's not even a thing. It's like it doesn't even make sense. It's just kind of like you got this extra junk inside of you. There's no point to it. And so it's like, in order to actually figure out the best version of you, there has to be this conceptualization of femininity in it. And at the end of the day, regardless of whether you're going to get sex or not, you're still going to want to live your best life. And the only way that you're going to do that is if you live like this, if you live like fully expressing the highest form of your masculinity. Because without that, you might be able to engage in some hedonistic pleasure, but you're going to be stomping all over your capability to unlock maximal fulfillment.
So Mark, how do you distinguish that? Because I'm imagining this guy listening, but he's only had those two camps right in his head. And he's like, oh yes, living your highest self, being a good Christian, doing all the things. That's my highest self. doing all the rules and, going to mass, however, however
Hmm.
often. Um, and it's been a slog for him, though he's felt good things to it. And all he hears you saying there is, do more,
Mm.
slog more, grind
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm not enjoying it now. Why would I enjoy it with more of it? I know I should.
No, that's a perfect point to bring up, because what that guy's operating from is this formula for a happy life that comes from do the things you should do. Be better at following the rules. Be better at checking the boxes, right? Just, you know, do the things, right? You got basically this massive honeydew list from, Christianity and your wife, that if you tick all the boxes perfectly, maybe you'll get a crumb of happiness at some point. And like, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is tapping into authentic desire, true desire, and learning how to live from there. Because, this is a good segue into a lot of the work that I do. Like, I help a lot of guys eliminate their escapism issues, primarily, the pornography issue. And my whole framework for helping guys do this, it's 3 questions. But the very first question, that's the most critical one, is what do you want? Because all coping behaviors are a response to unmet desires. All of them, right? And what you have to be able to do is tap into those desires and seek fulfillment in them. And yeah, all right, if one of those desires is to have sex, well then make yourself as attractive as possible, obviously. But you're also looking for other stuff in that. You're looking for affirmation. You're looking for status. You're looking for genuine pleasure. You're looking for recreation. You're looking for fun. You're looking for to kick ass in your career, right? And so you living your best life, it's being that driven man who lives from like the divine mandate on his heart. That's the way I see it. Is like when you're connected to your deepest and truest desires. All right, guys, some Christian guys, they think, well, that's selfish. It's like, no, I believe your deepest, truest desires are actually the Holy Spirit within you. Those are the deepest callings that God is, asking you to follow, right? Like, how else are you supposed to discover your vocation? I mean, I guess there's some instances where it's kind of forced upon you and you don't really want it or whatever. And God, there's many examples in the Bible, but I think for most people, most regular people, it's more of like a stirring in the heart. It's a deeper desire for something more meaningful, more potent, more alive. And it's learning how to do that. Not so much from this head down should, like where you just follow all these logical steps. It's more from this heart out. I want to have something more in my life. I want to have something better. And living from there, living from this very heart-centered place. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, one of the things I love about your content, Mark, is as you're describing this thing here, what you have is what you call this liminal space, right? The unknown. And you know that you have this longing in your heart, but you have no idea how it's going to be realized. You have no idea the sort of person you're going to become, but you just know how you want to feel and that you have a fire in you. And so it's a journey of discovery. It's exciting. It's an adventure.
It's adventure.
As opposed to, well, maybe at one point I'll tick all the boxes. And
right. It's basically like, are you an office worker cog, working for, the bureaucracy of the church? Or are you like this bold adventurer who's guided by the Spirit to like bring about, great, wonderful fruitfulness and good in the world that you probably can't even conceive of yet. Like, when I started this work, I had no idea what the heck was going to happen. And I managed to help transform the lives of thousands of men. It's like, I didn't know what the heck that was good. Like, I would have never have thought that ever, when I was younger. And you got to be willing to follow that intuition, that burning sense inside of yourself. And yeah, you got to be logical about it. You got to parse it through things that make sense, but it's got to start from that deeper space.
Do you have an example of like maybe a coaching client or something where they were stuck in this thing and they thought outside the box, keyed into the desire, and it just turned into something completely different? I put you on the spot there.
Yeah, let me think. I mean, I know that's, easiest one's like right in front of me, you like, I mean, when you started working with me did I ever think, immediately that you were going to be a guy who coaches other men on how to, improve their sex life? Would you ever have conceived of that?
No, I mean, it's not even something I mean, I'm an engineer, right? I work in software. I don't, yeah, maybe a bit of an artistic bent to it, but it's like, did I set out to be a man who's like coaching guys through their bedroom situations or telling like younger guys how to date? It's like, no, I didn't imagine myself doing that. But I put myself into the world, and all this fruitfulness comes back. The things that I'm saying connect, and other people aren't saying them. And it's just deeply, deeply fulfilling.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I like about what you've been doing lately is you're not like a lot of the dating coaches that I see, often. They tend to either just regurgitate like red pill, like stuff, just, general like hypergamy points and that sort of thing, or they're hyper focused on tactics. And I'm curious if you see an issue with any of that stuff coming up, because like, I'll see it in the porn quitting sphere. Guys will come in and they'll be hyper focused on how they, track their streak, what's a relapse, what's not, like, what's the technique to overcoming a craving and that sort of thing. But they'll kind of miss the forest for the trees, where they'll just be so zeroed in on the craving and the porn, they'll miss the big picture that, all right, if you want to quit porn, you have to live a life that you don't want to escape from. That's the biggest key. Right. There's some tactical stuff in there, but like that's the high level strategy behind all of it. And then the philosophy that grows from is you're worth the effort of doing that. This idea of inherent dignity. So that's the core philosophy. You're worth the effort of living your best life. Okay. And no matter what, no matter how your status fluctuates. And then the strategy for doing that is to create a life you don't want to escape from. And from there, quitting porn is downstream of those big picture things. And so I'm going to put you on the spot now. What do you think it is for the bedroom situation? Like, what's the higher level philosophy or the strategy that people will miss when they hyper focus on like the tactics of how to turn your wife on or get her attention or whatever?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do have a guy that I've been coaching recently who's really good at that. And he's gone, after getting my stuff, he's gone deep into the married red pill stuff. And yeah, it's just own your shit. Shut the fuck up. Like that, the idea is like, whenever she starts going at you, you do not let anything come out of your mouth until you're really sure it's what you want to say. You just stand there like a stone. And it's all this dread game or whatever. And
yeah,
I find that a lot of that. So as you were talking, I'm thinking that the problem with just saying the big picture, let's focus on the big picture, the grand vision and everything else, is that has been co-opted, especially in Christian circles, where it's like, well, the big picture that you need to be looking for, this grand theme of love and everything else, is just the thing you've always been taught, as opposed to something truly new that you don't have a grasp of. And so breaking down into the tactic level tends to anchor it into something a little more practical. So there's value to that.
Oh, 100%. You got to have the tactics, right?
You do need the tactics, and it does, and yes, they do shake up an approach. But yeah, I mean, this is finding over and over again, like his wife is, ramping up the frame testing or whatever. And one of the things that we're trying to communicate is like, how are you giving her a carrot? Is it just a stick that, oh no, this doesn't work on me? Or is there a sense of, actually, we're going somewhere. I am going somewhere. I would like to take you with us. So all this crazy stuff from you right now, darling, that I'm resisting, that I'm actually having a spine about, it is in the service that I want to go somewhere great. And I'd love to have you along. And so,
yeah. So I guess,
yeah,
go ahead.
Well, so it comes down to, yeah, is it just responding to her with all these little tactics, or is there like, you know what, I want to take our family on a vacation. I want to take our family, I want to start doing this activity with the boys. And, or I guess that's me. I'm speaking with me. I just started jujitsu, by the way, with my sons. That's nice. Been quite an experience. But it's another one of those things. I'm doing this and I'm building this and it's thriving. That's, I guess, a little segue there. my wife was telling that to me the other day. We were talking about our own marriage, and she's like, I think what's going to work with me, she's like giving me some tips here. What's going to work with me isn't so much of all these like masculine, feminine polarity stuff. We've got a whole household under it. When you're out doing things, building awesome things with the boys, and they're thriving, and all of this is happening without me having to push it, that's when I get swept up. That's when I'm just like taken on for the ride, and then, close the door. That's when just magic happens.
Well, so I guess then just hearing you talk about that, probably one of the patterns that is going to be getting in the way is like when you get hyper focused on the tactical level, you're playing a game where it's a small scale game where it's like, I press these buttons in her head and her heart by behaving these certain ways, and then I get sex. And if you find yourself getting frustrated because you didn't get sex, that means you're playing that small game.
Right.
But you have to keep the picture bigger. It's like, am I playing the leadership game? Am I creating a life that I'm inviting her into that is something she wants and something I want? Right? Because if you're playing that game, right, it's like if you're playing up on that higher level, then, one instance of missed sex, or, she rejects you, or she gets into a fight, or she shit tests you, whatever, it doesn't mean you lost that higher picture game, and you can be fine.
Right. You can even get the sex and be losing, and your higher level game is going down. Or you can miss the sex for whatever reason, you initiate and she doesn't respond to the initiation. And the way you did it is taking the whole thing into a higher trajectory, even on that metric, even just on the metric of her sexual responsiveness. So like both can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what do you see, like, as like, obviously I help guys, quit porn and stuff. And so I'm curious, how much do you see the usage of pornography as disrupting this process of repairing a dead bedroom?
It's a mess. It is just, it's a mess, and it's tough. Like, I mean, why don't I just be open and honest with you, Mark? Just the two of us and the entire internet. I mean, I had a time this week where I was uniquely tired. I've been adding a lot of new things in life, and I was just at the end of my rope. And then, we were engaging sexually, and it was just like, I didn't feel like I had it in me to like be that leader in that moment. I just wanted to kind of kick back and let it happen. But she wasn't from that frame either. She needed coaxing. She needed help. She needed leadership for that to happen. And so, East did not meet West there. And I felt myself going back into what's the point? Oh, this, I thought I was making all this progress. And you go into that little spiral. And I was able to communicate to her, in the past, I would have just gone on a total mood spiral. What I was able to do this time, after years, is to be able to, hon, I think what's going on with me right now is that I have gotten so used to like giving myself relief and emotional regulation through porn, through masturbation, all that stuff. And there's still bits of those that are still there. And that's what I'm struggling with. But the one thing is, I'm able in that moment now that when these things that are fairly rare, but they do come back up, I still don't go to porn. And as far as that, if I'm faced with a sleepless, irritable night, or looking at porn and getting rest, I choose the irritable night every single time. And what that ends up, but to answer your question, what that ends up doing is it creates this unattractive, needy posture with you and her. And even in that little story, the thing, good sex was on the table. It just required me to be like, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I'm just gonna throw myself into it. Hey, baby, let's see what happens. And at that point, that can make sexuality flourish. But what happens if you're needy about it and it's like, if I don't get the sex, I'm not okay, then you shoot yourself in the foot because you don't initiate. You don't give that energy because you're afraid of getting the negative result. And it's really, I do think that sex and masturbation, or that porn and masturbation from a young age actually trains you to see sexuality itself as primarily something you do to soothe yourself. And that's
Right.
not the ethos that builds really strong, creative, fun sex in a marriage.
Right. And to expand on that, because I think that's so critical, is, you're talking about, oh, well, if I could use porn to get more sleep and to unwind from the day and that kind of stuff. All those things are non-sexual problems.
Right.
Right. And so porn and masturbation, they become coping mechanisms that let you sweep your real life problems underneath the rug
But
in a
one
neurochemical
thing real
fashion.
quick, you said I'll use porn to help me sleep or to soothe myself or whatever. Now take porn away, right? And what are you going to instinctively put there? I'm going to use my wife to soothe
Right.
myself, to get a good sleep, whatever is.
Yes.
And that's not the idea of being able to paint a vision of something different.
Right.
Just a
But,
whole different way of looking at it.
exactly, 100% on that. But then the further, like the bigger point, I was driving toward there is that when you have that in your life, it's impossible to be your most attractive self because you are not having then to deal with the consequences of a life out of alignment. You just keep pressing the numb button, and you need to have the pain in your life. Not all the time. Like, you need to be able to find healthy ways to unplug, have pleasure, etc. That's actually very, very important. It's one of the big things that I actually am helping guys with. Like, most guys actually have no idea how to have fun on purpose anymore. Particularly the more hard driving and responsible they are, they have no idea how to have fun.
I want
That's
to
a
hear.
side
I
point.
want to hear stories there. By the way, I want to hear
Okay,
examples of how you
sure, yeah. But the thing is, when you have those kind of coping mechanisms in place, you don't then have a need to fix your shit. Like, it's kind of similar to this. Like, you could have horrendous sleeping patterns and you just get through the day by pounding, massive amounts of energy drinks and doing nicotine and like stuff like that. Okay? Like, those things, what they are is they're bad lifestyle enablers. And porn is probably one of the biggest forms of that for a man. And so, yeah, you got to cut the coping mechanisms. You got to cut this Band-Aid off. And yeah, it's going to be rough and painful, but then you're actually going to be able to feel the shape of the wound and start healing it. And in the context of a dead bedroom, it means that you're going to be able to start feeling like, oh, here's where this is out of alignment in the house. It's like, normally you just like unplug and jerk off and fall asleep. But then you're sitting there wrestling with the fact that, yeah, man, the dynamic in our house is shitty. Like, our kids are not listening to us. They're mad at us. My wife's yelling, upset and stressed all the time. And it's like, I should do something about that, right? But if you're just numbed out, passing out because you just jerked off, like, none of that opportunity is there. And so this is where I see, from my opinion, other than obviously the sexual misalignment and, the moral issues of using pornography, it's going to, just on a fundamental level, steal you of the fire and the internal ammunition necessary to make this transformation actually happen.
No, that's absolutely true. What do you say to the guy who says, "Well, if I do look at my life, it's over. I mean, the reason I'm escaping is because my life is shitty. There's all these things going wrong, and the very thought of trying to deal with them all just paralyzes me."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it should. I mean, it's actually, it's too much for you to handle. Your brain can only, the human brain's amazing, but it's also not very good at certain things. And what it's really not good at is handling a lot of different goals at once. That's one of the things it's the worst at, particularly I would say the male brain. People might argue that women are better at, parallel processing and whatnot. I don't know if that's really true or not, but the reality is you can't have too many goals. And so what you have to do is you got to create a game that you can win. And so that's one of the big things that I help guys with is like, all right, big goal is for you to create a life that you don't want to escape from. Well, there's probably too much for you to do all at once. And so what we're going to start with is where are your biggest sources of pain right now? Okay. Let's make those better. Let's find the bleeding neck issues and figure out how we can make those situations less painful. And the magical thing about this is that you don't need to solve all your problems in your life. You just need to know that they're moving in the right direction. That little emotional part of you that holds this desire for, I want to have more connection. I want to have more fun. I want to have, better fitness, whatever. Like whatever those big unmet desires are, you don't need them fully satisfied. You just need that part of you to know like, hey, we're caring about this.
Yeah.
Relief is in the process of being delivered. And from there, it's on board. Like your emotional mind will stop trying to step outside of your morals and authentic aspirations to grab the wheel and pull the car off the cliff down a hedonism mountain.
Yeah.
It just needs to know that you care. And so that's where you start. And you got to be willing to be like, it's like, what do you want, right? Do you want to just keep living in this life that you don't like, or do you want to make it better? Bottom line. And if they say, I just can't do it, that's where you're dealing with some deeper internal issues. And that's where you're probably looking at trauma and needing therapy and all that kind of thing. And some guys are there, maybe they've got some rough upbringings that block them from doing it. But for the general guy, if he's just given the option of, well, you can make things better, or you can let them stay shitty, or you can let things get worse. Which one do you want? You just work from there.
Yeah. Well, that is a key thing that, just helping one little aspect of something can do the whole give you sort of emotional clearance for the whole big giant problem because you're doing something about it.
Right. And I know we're coming up on an hour here. And there's one last thing that I wanted to talk to you about that has been on my mind recently. And I wanted to get your take on it.
Yeah.
Which is this idea of a stigma against sexual purity as a part of a masculine ideal. I think that, in most cases today, even it's becoming more mainstream too, with how disgusting the world has gotten with like OnlyFans and, that kind of stuff. Like you're seeing this idea of like women need to be more sexually pure. Right. And that's kind of traditionally always been highly prized and sought after. And, I want to marry a virgin and all of these kinds of things. But male sexual purity is kind of just not really talked about. It's kind of like, that's a little lame.
Yeah.
That's a little dorky. Like, I don't like that. Like, I'm not gonna celebrate that. That's not cool. The cool dude's James Bond, who's having a lot of one night stands and he can have sex with whoever he wants and all that kind of stuff. What do you think about that? Do you see that?
Oh yeah. I mean, I feel that, right? As far as many directions I could take this. Rollo's a big guy that like challenges this, and I want to give Rollo Tomasi.
Rational male,
rational
very popular
male, all
in the
that
Red
stuff.
Pill space.
He points out that like it's like, yes, you want to have a really strong marriage. Will be a really good playboy first, because then you've gone out, you've met all the women, you know how they tick, you know the lay of the land, and then yes, after doing all that, you want to lock one down, commit for life and everything else. That's what I have, and that's what I did. And at a certain point, you have to give the devil its due. I do think that, in the church, there's too much of this like masking. I couldn't be promiscuous because I am not attractive, charming. I don't have any of this masculine virtues. So it's not a temptation for me because they would never be attracted to me. That is different from the man for whom they are attracted to him, and he is laser focused on his faith, on his goals, and also doesn't want to damage people in the pursuit of them. Right. So because those things can have some signal aliasing, you do have to give the devil his due, saying that the virtue part of it comes when it's even an option. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. But I think what's missing is the integration of sexual purity into a masculine ideal. And I see that as just fundamentally limiting. And like, okay, let me just put it to you like this. All right. You take the guy who's massively competent, you know, powerful, strong frame, etc., rises to a, you know, position of prominence, a large sphere of influence, but he doesn't have sexual purity. He doesn't have sexual self-mastery. All right. He's a bit of slave to his lusts. What ends up happening?
I mean, he's manipulatable by those
Yeah.
lusts, right? Just anyone who
Right.
has, it's a leverage point.
Mm-hmm. And like, that's the thing is like, I believe that sexual self-mastery is the foundation of what would allow a man to be perhaps one of the most critical things that would allow a man to be a true, honorable, good, and benevolent patriarch. And without that, something bad is always going to happen. And sometimes it's really fucking bad. Like, you know, you just see it as like the whole prima nocta stuff that used to exist. Like, you know, the king, he got to have first rights on every virgin.
Right.
It's like, what? Or, you know, you see it as the powerful man who destroys his family because he has an affair, or you know, it can spiral in a
even
bunch of
just
different
polygamy.
directions.
The idea that like we
Sure.
have a polygamous society, and that's great because the alphas go to the top, and you know the betas are weeded out of the gene pool. You know, but you can't build a civilization like that. You can't like
No.
even
You build a war-torn nation.
right. Even the quote unquote polygamous societies that have existed in history, the tiny sliver of men actually have more than one wife. It's still mostly monogamous because that's how you build.
Right.
That's how you build culture and civilizations and all these things.
Right. And then you also fundamentally have to keep other men down and keep them, you can't be rooting for them to be their maximally competent self, because then they're going to end up stealing some of your wives. And it just becomes like this, you know, really gross sort of situation. And so, you know, that's something that I've been feeling recently, is that like we have to make masculine sexual purity seem powerful, because it is. Like, what I see it almost as is like the ability to concentrate your power, your energy. Like, you think about a man's energy as like a, you know, garden hose. All right. If that garden hose has a bunch of different little holes in it, the stream's going to be very weak. But if it's, you know, tight, contained, you know,
Right.
that sort of thing, then he can create like this laser beam, right, like that. And that's what I think a man is most powerful, is if he can fully direct his energy. And that cannot happen if he has weaknesses in his sexual fortitude. And that's where I'm looking for, is like a rebrand on this, where, you know, like growing up in the Catholic Church, like going to Catholic school, we'd have these chastity speakers come in. You'd have this man who's like promoting, you know, chastity. And he just seems like the weakest dude I've ever seen. Like, you know, effeminate, like just unimpressive on every level. I don't want to be like you. Okay. And, you know, maybe they were great guys and all this other kind of stuff, but it didn't inspire me. Okay. But like, instead you see this strong, kingly man who simply just cannot be affected by any thought or hoe or promiscuous woman at all. And all of a sudden that guy seems powerful. He seems like, ooh, he's above this, right? Like, you know, that's, to me, that is something that needs to be focused more on and needs to be really celebrated. Like, yeah, women, celebrate your sexual purity, but men, do the same thing too. Why wouldn't you want this like white hot fire flowing through you that allows you to express and magnify the goodness inside of yourself?
It's going to be essential to distinguish that from the distortion, from the, you know, the first chastity speaker that you talked about. You got to be able to say, no, this guy actually doesn't have what we're talking
Well, that guy couldn't be promiscuous if he wanted to
Right.
be. You know, he could use porn probably, but he's not going to be able, like, it's kind of like when it comes to a man's, I think, responsibility to have a capacity for violence. All right. You don't want to be a violent man, but you want to have the capability of being violent in a just way when necessary.
And what do
right?
you
It's the
do
same
with that capacity? The things you can, there are new avenues without even being violent, to just being the man who understands the way, you know, aggression and leverage and all, just knows more about how the world works competently. Different avenues are open to him. And
Right. Cunning as serpent, innocent as doves kind of thing.
yeah,
Right.
absolutely. I mean, I will say the guy I was talking about in the story earlier, you know, his wife, he got his marriage back in line. Her cancer eventually came back and she passed
Mm.
away. And it was
Oh, damn.
it was at that point where he kind of went, it's like, wait, I know how all this works. And he was pretty promiscuous. He went out and, you know, met a lot of women. And then he sort of lived that story where he found someone he really wanted and he came back to his faith and saw the emptiness of it, and then has built his second marriage. He's built really, really solid and come back to faith. But I do think we face that question, Mark. I think we always face that question of the prodigal son story. You believe him. You believe that his heart, he's learned the lesson by going out and living it. How do you do that? This is our challenge as men today in the church. How do we build that kind of virtue without having to go experience, oh, I can be successful in those things. I also ruin a lot of people's lives in the process and find the experience
Mm-hmm.
the emptiness firsthand.
And you gather a lot of sexual baggage.
Right.
You know, you get it. Like that's the one thing that's not talked about in these sort of situations. The guy goes like, get it out of your system. You know, while you're young, go sleep with a lot of women, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't just go away after you get married. You know, if you have that baggage, you're gonna be haunted by memories, especially when things are tough with your wife. You're gonna be like, oh well, I should have done this. Like you're gonna be thinking about that last woman. You're gonna be these kind of things. They poison your capacity to be fulfilled and connected. So that's just a side point. But I think I cut you off. Keep going.
Well, the thrust of the point is like there's a way that you learn something by going and doing it wrong, getting smacked, you know, falling on your face, learning and stepping up. And so, you know, I think charitably, there's only so much charity I have for good old Rollo Tomasi because man, he dishes it out. But, you know, charitably, I'll say, okay, you've got a point in that you're saying to get the real deal, you have to prove that you've gone out and experienced the meaninglessness, what it takes to attract women and the meaninglessness of promiscuity. Once you truly know that, now you know the game and you can have a solid marriage. And he's not wrong in some cases. Some people do live that and they do find that redemption. But the question is, how do you create that same strength, that same virtue without having to go off to the far country and squander your inheritance with prostitutes?
Well, I think I know what it is. And I think it comes back to this kind of like, you know, analogy of the hose, right? Because if you allow yourself to become, you know, be present in the crucible of your own sexual passion, and you can conquer that crucible. Like this is something that Eastern religions are very big on. It's this idea of like this rising of your sexual energy, like this transmutation process. And I'm not particularly bought into any of that stuff because I think it can take some very weird and you know, unuseful turns, particularly for a Christian. But there's something true. Yeah, depending on which ones you get into. But yeah, like the general thing though is that if you really do this work, you gain something far more powerful, and that is a relationship with your sexuality that transcends sexual activity, where you can embrace and hold and enjoy your sexual charge without having to have sex. And that is a superpower that most men don't even know exists. It's something that can only be experienced through, you know, really going through that crucible and having, like, it's essentially what has to happen is I believe that like some parts of the sexual maturation cycle of a man, they're optional. Like some things are automatic, like, you know, your balls are going to drop, your voice is going to get deeper, you know, all that kind of shit, right? But the second layer of it is like, will you build the neural infrastructure that allows you to actually hold that sexual charge and have it invigorate and make your life better? It'll allow you to bring a sensuality and passion to mundane situations that otherwise, you know, you would never actually gain access to.
I was talking to
a
guy the other day, and he was, as I was describing sexual transmutation, he was like, no, man, you know, sexual arousal isn't wizard mana. And I was like, yeah,
it is. It's about the closest thing we got.
Right. It is.
Right. And so it's like you see that man with sexual purity. What he really is someone who's like a massive like juggernaut on the plane of spiritual energy, in my opinion. That's what you stand to turn into if you really do this work. And this is not the same thing as repressing your sexuality. Okay, like you can just shut your sexuality off and it'll start to atrophy. That can happen. There are people who they don't use porn, they don't do whatever. They just put their sexuality away in a box and it eventually just shuts up. They just squash it down so hard. But then they're living like with only a fraction of their actual self alive. And what I'm saying is be brave enough to let it out of the cage and contend with it, right? Contend with it, integrate it. And that's where you unlock who you truly are. Like your fulfillment is no longer behind this gate of conditional access to sexuality or sexual pleasure. It's something that is inherent that you have, it can be fulfilling in and of you. And this isn't to negate like the fulfillment that, you know, you might be called to with marriage and relationship, but it's something that you always have access to and you're not dependent on another.
The one thing that comes to mind as I hear you talk, one of the things that you said, one of your best quips, actually, I mean, you have so many, but one of your best ones is quitting porn is the rite of passage of the modern man. And as I hear you talk, Mark, I'm wondering, that's very true, and it's a great way to look at it. But can we expand that rite of passage? Could we come up with an even better rite of passage that incorporates that if it's there, but like truly distinguishes the guy who's just repressed his sexuality versus the one who can wield it?
Yes. So I would say that's still the rite of passage. That's the entry point. But then you have this point where it's like, you know, you reach the realm of, you know, potential benevolent patriarch. Okay. Like that's like a mastery kind of level. And that is when you can keep your heart warm and open, your sexual energy flowing, and not be having sex. You can hold goodwill for everyone. You know, you don't need to get anything from a pretty woman. You can simply wish her goodwill, and you can still have that sexual charge inside of yourself without having it go out and attach to her and turn into some sort of lustful grasping.
Yeah.
That's a internal sort of alchemy that most guys can't even conceive of because they've never actually played with that energy enough inside of themselves. They've run away from their sexuality. They've run away from their masculine charge because they feel like it's something they got to get out of them. You know, you hear this. The guy's like, I just got to get it out of me. It's just like, I got to get off.
Right.
I got to jerk off. And it's like, you don't actually.
So
in fact, if you allow
that at scale, that's the question. How do we get that in our churches? How do we get that in our communities to teach men this skill at scale?
Well, it starts by, you know, plugging up the leak, right? And that's where I've still been, you know, focusing on doing the work is like, we got to stop the porn and the masturbation and stuff because otherwise that energy will never rise in the first place. So it's like, it starts there. But then once you get after that, it's like, it becomes this passion, you know, between you and your muse through making love to life and learning how that dance works, not only in the practical sense out in the world, how do you go out, you be competent, you get shit done, but also inside of your heart during the process. And so, yeah, I think that can be taught at scale. I think that's, you know, what I'm building at Frontline Man. But, you know, it's going to need, some support to really get it out there.
Well, I definitely recommend any guy who's dealing with porn, dealing with really any sort of escapism. You gotta check out what Mark's doing because it's second to none. Absolutely changed my life, and will change countless others.
Well, thank you, man. You know, you've done amazing work here. And, you know, any guy out there, you got a son, you know, you want him to understand better sexuality, check out The Way of Men with Maids. It's a fantastic book. And then also look through it yourself, all right? Because chances are you were never taught this stuff. You know, if you're looking for an introduction to red pill or sexual dynamics, but you're also a Christian man and you don't want all that like crazy BS that typically comes with it online, this really sets the framework for it all. So, and obviously if you got a dead bedroom, definitely follow Giff's stuff. He's a fantastic follow on X. What is it? Giff Lasta at Giff Lasta. Yeah. Okay. So thanks, man. I really appreciate you coming in here and doing this chat. We'll have to do it again here soon.
Let's do it, Mark. Always good to talk.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Catch you later. Yeah.